chipped them off. So 1981 is right here, so we have a really good decline in the population of what was harvested. Started coming back up, and then we had another 1986, another chipped them off again. Then population goes back up, and then it starts to come back down. So 1992, let's see, 92 is right here. We had no mass, so no acorn crop. That was followed by, so 99, that's the fall of 1992. So here's the winter of that, pretty much that same year. So there's spring of the winter of 92, 93. There was a blizzard in March that they actually, after every snow event during the winter, we go out and we track the movements of deer, so we get a overwinter deer capacity, how many deer are actually in the forest that overwinter. It ended up being John Brady, forest manager, was that they actually weren't tracking, they were finding dead bodies, dead deer in the forest, because they were just put back past what they could handle. They actually were starving to death. So the other different, another not formats, yes, kind of routine, but now it's been more fluctuating by different environmental conditions. Some brought on by humans, some mostly it's just natural conditions. Could be global warming. It's too small, I think. Study area too. It's only 4,000 acres, so.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
There is no more problem with the gypsy moth?
We do have small outbreaks, especially in West Point. They do have small. Not much of it. They really did a lot of DDT and stuff like that to combat the gypsy moth back then. But other chemicals, they're approved for fighting that. We've seen them a little bit of just moth, but nothing really breaking out major sense.
And when they start to use this chemical after 86,
What's that?
when they start using this DDT,
No, usually I think 1970s actually DDT was out, but they actually did find other chemicals that are approved for the use. And there's other, there's also a lot of beech in the forest. Then we have, we don't have the beech bark disease here, but not know if they do, and that really affects. So another invasive species. So here's another thing we also do is we track the snowpack and amount of snow, and record how much depth of snow. So like we do 18 inches and 24 to 36 inches. We don't get that too much around here for long periods of time. But 18 inches is the belly of a deer. So anything above around 18 and more, deer actually starting to plow. So if there's not much of an acorn crop, then deer are really going to be suffering. So this goes back to 1986, 84, 86, when Forest Manager John Brady took over. So here's kind of a correlation between the overwintering deer population and the acorn crop for the last, since 1995. As you can see, as the acorn crop goes up, so that's the deer population in the following year. If we have a crash, so here we no acorns that year, and the following year, the deer population crashed. We have a little bit of an acorn crop here, nothing much, so the deer come up. So it's usually, it's a deer lag behind 1 year from the acorn crop. As we say, acorns are next year's deer, not this year's. So here we had a boom crop 2 years, and so actually deer population went up, and kind of went over back and forth with it.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
How are you counting the acorns?
During this period of time, what we do is we go out to known hula hoop, and we take and we just randomly throw a hula hoop, and we count the number of acorns and species within that. At each stop, we throw the hula hoop 10 times. And then count, because we don't want a spruce stand, because we know there's no acorns, so we're kind of biased, because we are doing it in areas that we know there are oak trees. John Brady's been trying some other techniques of actually just going to certain trees and just doing a observation of what he's seeing with that and kind of figuring that out into the populations for that. And using comparison of the hula hoop and the other methods, it's about the same. Another.
Is the acorn population is down, the deer population also down?
The deer population will go. Everything is according to what else they have to eat. So, like this year here, 1999, there was no acorns, and it was also that year was a drought. So there was no grass was very hard to come by. So the deer population did grass.
Next year.
The following year, yes, you did. And also, what happens is, this is actually be during the winter. So, if the deer, there's no food here, the deer actually went into town, downtown where people had ornamental plants growing, so that's they had food available. And so some of the deer actually learned to just stay in town and then didn't come back. Others, staff death and stuff like that. There's also there's research going on, correlation between acorns and tick populations as well. There's a study that's going on.
Yes.
Because as the deer population goes up, so does the tick population, and so in the mouse populations with that.
There seems to be a cycle there now.
There is a cycle. Yeah. There was a kind of a constant cycle, but now it's kind of getting a little bit out of, somewhat a little bit out of whack sometimes. What also we see too is, so like this year here was the viabilization of the acorns is very high on this year. Because for the oak trees, as you probably know, is that there's two main types of oaks here. We have the red oaks and they have the white oaks. White oaks take 1 season to produce. Red oaks take 2 seasons to produce. So acorns that are being developed right now is 2 years before the actual drop. Because of that, they actually have a harder shell than red oaks. But also there's a little parasite called the weevil that feeds on the acorns. If there's a weevil inside, when it drops to the ground, the deer and other animals can smell that it's inside and will not consume. So this year, on this year here, we actually, there was a lot of acorns, but a lot of them were not viable because a lot of weevils were already inside, and so the deer weren't able to eat some of them. So this year, in 2001, we had a bumper crop of an acorn year. Also, but majority of the acorns were viable because of this drought here, that there was no acorns in the summer. Oak trees actually will drop it, they're abandoning their acorns, they would just fall immature acorns, which hurt the weevil population heavily because that food source was gone. So this year there was not enough, the weevil population was very low, meaning that the acorn viability was very high. So there was a lot of excess food out there. Same thing here. We just had in 2010 a really extremely high bumper year. It's after an ice storm, but we did have. It seems that the trees, especially the red oaks, they produce acorns every year. So every 2 years, it takes 2 years to produce an acorn, but they have ones that we followed this fall, and they have new ones on. It seems they actually did all of them in 1 year. The following 2 years, we have none, for acorn. There's a few chestnut, but nothing major.
That's the first time it occurred where following a bumper crop of acorns, you
Yep.
did not get a big increase in your deer count.
No, we did not. It's just, whether or not it was something else into it, so actually it started going up. And then it's possibly is that the next year probably would have gone up another again, but with no acorns that year.
Just did.
There's also, was not much for food on the ground. We actually had kind of a drought. So the food availability was low. The deer actually was starting to coming down at the end of a large drop in the deer health and stuff like that. The deer were starting to recover and they were hit by something else another factor that hurt them. And so they dropped down again. So here's precipitation from 1960. What we have is down at what we call the old headquarters, the old office. There is a small metal bucket that's manually measured precipitation. This is both rain and snow combined from 1960s. This is located outside the director's house. In 1998 is when we added the digital, but this is all manual, so we can actually compare. So this is a little bit. This is measured after every rain event. Somebody goes out and physically measures these samples. So you can kind of see there is enough pretty good.
What is that, leak there?
This right here, this would have actually been, let's see, this is 2011, this is Hurricane Irene, and we actually had, Irene did a much more damage than it would have. Was only, after around here was only a little over 8 inches of rain, but we already had, the previous 2 weeks, we already got 12 inches of rain, so there's no place for the rain to go. So we actually had a really bumper year for rain. Even though there was a kind of a drought at the beginning of the year, it still looks like we had a bumper, a wet year, which we really did not. Some of the things we do in the forest to get other projects that have been done. We also do electrofishing in the streams to get species that actually are in the forest. This is also part of a trout program that we're doing. So we were testing streams outside the forest as well for species to see the presence of brook trout in the area. What streams carry and which don't. And looking for their food source, looking for black-nosed dates, because that's brook trout's main food supply. Is that. And we have two staff members. This is Jack Caldwell, the forest lodge manager, and this is Kate Pavlis. She's one of the educator, and she's working on the North Slope project. These are two people from the DEC that came down to give us a hand when the first started this. Our electrofisher was out of service at the time, so they brought theirs.
So what function you make?
How this functions is what we have is a 12 volt battery here. This goes up to this unit, which takes that 12 volt power, turns it into AC power, and then back into DC power, so you can get 240 from 120 to 800 DC volts out of this one here. So what you have is a positive here, and then behind is a little wire, bare wire strings in the water, which is the negative. And what it does, when he pushes the button here, it creates an electrical field all around, from the positive to the negative. It actually electrifies the water and anything that's in it. Does not kill the animal, it just stuns them. Actually, they go out straight. We have to adjust the pulse rate and the amperage to get it kind of right. So you have to do is you have to test the water for conductivity. If the conductivity is low, It means you're gonna turn the amperage up and the pulse up. If it's high, you need to turn it down low. If you have it too high if the conductivity is high, you actually will kill the fishes with that. We find that the smaller animals, smaller fish and creatures, you want the pulse rate higher. Larger animals can have a little bit longer, smaller because how much they get hit with that.
And then what happened with, what type of data you collected this?
This one here, they actually collected black-nosed dace, sunfish, pumpkin seed sunfish. Occasionally we get eels, they come out small eels, chub, creek chub, there's sticklebacks, and some of the, we get a few brook trout, so we have been stocking some brook trout. We have a trout program, I'll show you that in a little bit, where we actually raise trout. And students raise them from eggs, and we put them in. It's not a restocking program, it's an education program. So it's the kids actually, they physically get to release their fish. They see every stage of life. So they come in, some of the programs we have actually have the kids come back 6 different trips. They see every stage of life, and then they release the fish into the stream.
They release the fish here.
They release the fish into the streams here, yes, and into the reservoirs. Another experiment we can do here is these deer exclosures. We have several of them. Here, this location here, this is down by the filtration plant. This one was, we have this was actually a hemlock stand that woolly gouge insect has defoliated, and so we went in and cleared this area to see what would grow after. So we actually have 2 exposures here. This one here, actually, we went in and actually put in native trees of this area into this exposure to see how they do. Over here is another exposure where we actually we cleared the area but left it alone. And then we have an area in the back here which is left alone but unfenced to see the effects of deer on the area as well. We find that white pine does very well. Here, actually, here's another exposure planted about the same time, but you can kind of see the effects here. Deer can get into this area, and this is deer cannot get into this. This is maybe a little bit easier. This is about 4 years of growth, 4 to 5 years of this exposure. And most of these trees that you've seen are actually growing up by themselves. See, most of these are birch, which does very well after a clearing. This also was on off of Old West Point Road, Old Continental Road. That this was another hemlock stand on the hillside that we went in, we cleared, we burnt the brush, and then so we actually did plant a lot of trees here. There's some over here and some in the back. But this all we planted areas and we left some areas unplanted to see what would happen. And the birch trees did very well. We also have back here. This is an invasive Atlantis. Yes. That seems to do very well. We did go in and every so often actually cut down the Atlantis to try to control it a little bit, but it does very well.
We got to go to
What's that?
We got to go to
So notice that this is actually on the North Slope Black Rock. I should have had a picture of it. North Slope Black Rock is a large study area. Vladimir is actually part of it. What we're doing is studying the sudden death oak syndrome, which we do not have here. But what it is studying what would happen if we did have that. So we've gone in, we have 16 plots Some of the plots we wanted, and we girdled all the oak trees, left them standing to simulate sudden death oak syndrome. Others we went in, we only girdled 50% of the oaks. On other ones, we actually did, went in and girdled all the non-oaks, left the oaks alone. And others, we actually had controls. So it's 4 of each type. And we're studying mainly is just the center, so we eliminate the effects of edge. So there we actually have many, if I go back, first one here. So here's the North Slope of Black Rock here. So we actually have a lot of stations out there. What we're doing is soil temperature, moisture, and air temperature compared in each study class to see the effects. And actually was seeing how species move. Evaluating one of the spiders to see how the spiders species change in the area. And so that actually doing small mammals, actually going and trapping small animals, doing animal tracking during the winter, and looking at as many different things, plant species as they come in, any new species, what's coming in, things like that. It's a large project that has, I believe, like 12 different